affirmations and gave us a wonderful affirmation that we used every day, still do, and said, meditate. Well, Jerry and I had never meditated. I don't think we even knew anyone who meditated. It reminded me of walking on beds or hot coals, or lying on beds of nails, or people at the airport that stood on one foot with their hand out. You know, it just was weird to me. And so I said, well, what is meditation? What do you mean? And Theo said, sit in a comfortable room and wear comfortable clothing and quiet your mind and concentrate on your breathing. And when your mind wanders, and it will, just release the thought and focus on your breathing. And do it together, it will be more powerful. So we left that meeting, and I don't remember ever feeling better. It was more of a feeling thing that happened to me than an intellectual thing that happened, because it all happened so fast. And so we left, and I remember we went directly home, closed the drapes, put on comfortable clothing, sat in the wingback chairs with an etagere between us, because it was just weird and we were kind of embarrassed to be doing this thing together, you know. And we set a timer for 15 minutes. And so I just did what Theo said. I just started focusing on my breathing, as in and out, in and out. And right away, I felt numb. Almost immediately, I could not tell the difference between my foot and my nose. Remarkable feeling. I really liked it. And so the timer went off, really startled us. And so I said, let's do it again. So I set the timer again, and again, I'm just focusing on my breathing. And again, I'm totally detached. I can't even feel that I'm sitting in the chair. It was really a very nice feeling. And and the timer went off, and I said, I'm really liking this. Let's do it again. Jerry teases me because I tend to be all or nothing. And so we set the timer again, and again, that wonderful feeling of detachment. And right before the timer went off, for the third 15-minute time, something breathed me. It was like I was a billows, and something was pushing the air in and sucking the air out of me. It was incredible. And I guess I was making some noise, because Jerry looked around and said that it looked like I was convulsing in ecstasy. And to me, it was the most remarkable, loving feeling. And then the timer went off. And now my teeth are buzzing, not chattering, buzzing. That energy was so strong. We realize now that that was our first interaction with Abraham. We didn't know it then. And so we meditated after that every day for 15 or 20 minutes. I don't think we missed a day. And then about 9 months later, right before Thanksgiving of 1985, while we were meditating, my head began just sort of moving. And it was a nice sensation, but it didn't make anything of it. And then on about the third day of meditating and my head moving, suddenly I realized, it's bizarre, even now when I think back on it, how strange it must sound to someone else. My nose was spelling letters like it was writing on a chalkboard, and I was on the M, N, O when it occurred to me. And I said, Jerry, I'm spelling letters with my nose. And then goosebumps all over me, waves of wonderful, rapturous feelings just moved through me. And Abraham has told us since that they were very enthusiastic, that I had finally realized that they were projecting something that I was interpreting, because they had been projecting blocks of thought to me before that, but I was still following Theo's guidance that when your mind wanders, focus on your breathing. So every time a thought occurred to me, I would just breathe more and do my best to release the thought. So that's where it began. Jerry got his notebook right away and began asking questions, because he had had experience with the Ouija board. I said, isn't that funny? You know, I was so afraid of the Ouija board, and now I am one. You know, it was like... And so for a few weeks, that's the way Jerry talked to Abraham. He would ask Abraham a question, and Abraham would spell with my nose, and he would wake me up in the middle of the night and prop me up in bed and ask Abraham questions. So after 9 months of meditating, and my nose was spelling letters, Abraham spelled, I am Abraham. I am your spiritual guide, which was what I'd been asking 9 months earlier, but I don't think I'd posed the question for all of those months that we'd been meditating. I am Abraham, I am your spiritual guide. And they've explained to me since then that they addressed or referred to themselves singularly because that was the way I had posed the question. Now they refer to themselves as they, because it's a collective consciousness. And then one night we were laying in bed and I had my arm laying across on Jerry's chest and I was almost asleep and my hand started thumping. And I said, that is not me. It must be Abraham. And so I sat up and I had this very clear impulse to go to the typewriter. And so I went to the typewriter and my hands were just energized. It's difficult to explain. And I held my hand. I type fast anyway. I've been tested at like 120 words a minute when I was really typing a lot. But so I held my hands over the keyboard and my hands were like a blur on the keyboard, and then they just went very slowly and they typed every letter on the keyboard almost as if they were familiarizing themselves with the keyboard, and then they began to type, and it said, I am Abraham, we will write a book together, just all kinds of reassuring, wonderful things. And so I've kind of lost track of how much time we spent typing, but it was a month or two maybe. And then we were on a freeway in Phoenix one day and rounding a corner on the interstate that's not very well banked, and there were big trucks on each side of us, and they were both crossing into our lane at the same moment, and it felt like we were going to be crushed by those. And at that moment I felt something pulling in my jaw. You know how when you yawn the impulse is there and you can't really stifle it? If you're going to yawn, you're going to yawn. You can cover your mouth up, but the yawn is going to happen. It's like that. It was like that sort of sensation. And I could feel, and I said, I think they're going to speak. And then they did. They said, take the next exit. And so we exited the freeway and parked under the freeway. And Jerry talked to Abraham for the first time.